On today's episode of Accelerating Excellence, we have Greg Newman. Greg is the Group Chief Executive of Onyx Capital Group, the world's #1 liquidity provider in oil derivatives trading. Greg was the second super trader I hired at Mandara Capital, and it's been simply wonderful to be there firsthand and see his journey from graduate to elite leader in one of the most competitive industries on the planet. Aged just 22 years old, Greg launched Mandara's Crude Oil desk. Within just 3 years, Greg's desk went from zero to become the largest independent market maker in Dated Brent and Dubai swap markets. In 2016, Greg left Mandara with fellow super trader Omar Kayaam to launch Onyx. As CEO at Onyx, Greg has been the driving force behind the development of Onyx on the trading floor and beyond. He established the group's highly successful training programs, its unique research offering, data services, brokerage, news, and analysis. Greg featured in the book 40 Classic Crude Oil Trades, real-life examples of an innovative trading, and the crude desks he formed at Mandara and Onyx are also mentioned in Brent Crude Oil, genesis and development of the world's most important oil benchmark. In 2023, Greg published his book, World of Oil Derivatives. Greg's success is testament to his principle-based approach, his fierce drive, stoic mindset, and he's a fearless risk taker. And the Onyx Capital Group continues to expand under Greg's leadership as Greg prepares to launch the retail trading arm of Onyx Capital Group later this year, with the premise to digitize, democratize, and provide access to the full range of the oil swaps markets to all. Most importantly to me, Greg's become one of my closest friends over the years, and we've overcome some insane situations together. So this conversation is extra special for me. In this episode, we discuss the early days, the stoic mindset, driving growth, and the transition from aspirational trader to CEO. I hope you enjoy. Greg Newman, welcome to Accelerating Excellence.
Thanks for having me, James. Really happy to be here. Happy to see everything you've done as well. So keen to get stuck in.
Oh, thank you, mate. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. It's long overdue. And I want to kick off by just asking you to share with those listening, like where it all began for you.
Yeah, well, I think it was when we first met, and that's where it all goes back to. End of 2012, pretty difficult employment scenario actually in the UK. Very difficult to get a job in finance, investment banking, after it being all the rage for so long. It just so happened that kind of a prop firm slash hedge fund, for listeners kind of see it like that. Mandara, they were looking for. They were looking for junior oil traders in financial oil markets, which is unbelievably specific. And it just so happened to be exactly what I thought I wanted to do. I'd interned at an investment bank on the sales and trading floor, got a bit of a taste there. I actually worked for a kind of a physical gas trading firm for a little bit. And but it was all dancing around the problem, and actually got pretty good advice, which I think you probably would have given the same advice had you known me, which is like, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that, you're young, you got all these options, what specifically do you want to do, if you know, and what is that? And that's what you should try and do, stop all this dancing around. And I actually really appreciated that advice. And even though it was a tough job market, I really, really went after every contact I could possibly have, every interview, and then suddenly, like it tends to happen, like with your concordance points, when everything is aligned, a job appeared, and it happened to be the exact one. So when I applied for that job, yeah, it's only a grad scheme type thing, junior trader, but I would say I probably put in 50-60% of my preparation and work into those interviews at banks and at other places. But when I knew this was the one, I went 100%, and that's when I met you, got kind of my initial interview out of the way, tried to show my passion, and then did the big assessment center, the famous assessment center, James Kingy Assessment Center, trademark. It was very new for the, it still doesn't really exist. Kind of almost like half, army type approach, trying to actually test the psychological side of things, as well as, resilience, as well as obviously the competency in maths and all the rest of it. So I would say that actually suited me. It allowed me to actually demonstrate my values and beliefs, as well as just, a kind of base level competency. And I think, you could speak more on it, but I think I did well, but, apart from one part, And I think it was up to me towards the end to like really nail down, no, I really, really want this. And luckily did a good enough job to persuade yourself and Alf, the owner. And kind of the rest was history. You know, spent 3 years at Mandara. We built out what we built out, and obviously we can talk about that a lot in detail if you want. And then after 3 years, went and started my own thing with another guy at Mandara, Omar, another guy who came through the program. And 8 years later, we're effectively still doing
You are.
it out. Yeah.
And mate, look, there's something there I want to highlight that I think is so powerful, and it's, I think it's a trait that you're particularly good at, but it is advice that can be adopted. And it's like that, again, when you are clear on what you want, the focus and prep, it becomes so much easier to engage and invest that effort in that thing when you know it is what you're sort of in effect designed to do. And it was sickening the level of prep that you went to, but that is control. That's something everyone has control of, right? In terms of any goal that they're pursuing.
Well, it's now something it's actually quite easy to dissociate the generically hungry graduate or someone coming into the job saying, I want to get rich, I want to do this, I want to do that. And I get quite a lot of questions on LinkedIn, on people in general, what should I do? And they're obviously looking for a cheat code shortcut. And we know all this. But the first thing I always say is that decide exactly what you want to do and give everything for that. And I would like
Such good advice.
Yeah, but you can move it a little bit forward. Let's say, if I rewind and say this job didn't come that was there, still pursuing it. At the end of the day, I still look back and think the job I had prior to that, was I giving everything for it? Was I taking all the flack I needed to take to get myself in an opportunity that when the opportunity arose, I was ready to strike? So that's another part of the advice I try to give, because when people are asking advice, I feel like what they're really saying is, can you do it for me?
Yeah.
Have you actually done everything? Have you just obsessed over it, learned everything? Another thing is, you cannot at 22 years old, unless you're a super coder, and I guess these things do exist now, but at my time it was the only thing I have to give is my time and my effort. I don't have anything of skill yet to offer as a service. So at bare minimum, you can do the hours, you can be what do you call it, irreplaceable on that basis. And
that's something that I'll just share with people as well, because I think you are just such a powerful example of that. Even in those, it was a really hard assessment day, and it was designed to take everyone to failure. And one of the tasks, took you to a failing point. And I remember the thing, because what we were looking at was, how do people behave in those moments? And I think this is what we're talking about. How do you behave in those moments where it isn't, okay, you don't have your dream job, it's not lining up the way you want it, but you are control of how you behave in terms of your effort, your strategy, the threads you pull on. And I remember it so vividly, your reaction was, look, I didn't do as well as I could have there. Give me 10 minutes, come back, give me another shot. And it was so assertive and like, it was the confidence to even be able to say that, because it was quite intimidating and assertive in terms of the environment you were in. But it was just that, no, I've got this, go again. And that's the behavior we were looking for, right? And who isn't? And I don't think people should be scared to do that or say that when they are in, whether it's in a work environment or on a selection test.
It has, but I think it's getting yourself in that mental state. Like, I really did know in some respects, this was an massive aspirational goal, but in other respects, it was like, this is the last chance. And I think the combination, the fear and the possible massive opportunity was like, you can get scared, you can be, worried, try and be all slick with your answers, or you could be like, look, how are you going to act when I genuinely am desperate for this, so I need this to come across a certain way, or at least I'm not going to accept failure. And I think there's almost like a certain piece to that. I think you call it like flow state, right? You're just like, I knew this is it now. So like, what's the point of holding back? What's the point of not being, really on this? Of course, I guess you can go too far with that, and you don't want to look desperate. But I absolutely wanted it. But I would liken it to, and I don't know, but selections of anything high performance. We all know, or a lot of high performers will know, what moment that was. And ironically, I think most people would say it was probably the most least nervous you were, because it was like, if this is the opportunity, then I'm going to go for it. Marcus Rashford, when he got his first game, debut game, it's like, it's this random guy getting an opportunity because so many people are injured. But he's like, I mean, I'd love to speak to him about it. How did you feel soon? Probably like, I've got this, or at least I'm going to everything out on the field because I know this is my opportunity and what else is going to come. So,
And the prep paid off. Again, another vivid memory there was Alf coming out after, who was the owner of the company, coming out after speaking to you. And he was like, how the fuck does that guy know so much about oil? So
well, that,
the prep paid off, and there was some.
sorry, I was just going to say, I did have my brother involved in the
Yeah,
industry.
of course.
That's a big part of it. And, you know, brothers, you tend to want to do what your brother does if you have a good relationship. I think I've seen that in a lot of people. And, you know, he got me interested in it. He's a very salesy, passionate person himself. And I did fall in love with what he was doing. He was slightly different. He was in sales and oil, but, you know, linked to the trading. And I thought the trading suited me to a T. But I think he was very good at, and I was very lucky to have him to be so willing to talk about oil. You know, so by the time I got to an interview like that, yeah, I probably, if anything, knew a bit more than say, you know, the guys interviewing me like Sean and stuff like that, because that's not what they did, right? They were traders. They weren't really studying the underlying market. So that was really, I could tell that was, I have to double down on that because it's going to be unusual for a graduate to have
There you go. Again, I love that thinking as well, that second level thinking, right? Where can I have an edge or demonstrate things that others might not? And I guess that links to, I guess I'd love to ask you about this because it was so, I mean, so you have a brother that's in oil sales, but I mean, like it was freakish for Alf to say it the way he did, like, you know, and your sincere interest from the off in like the fundamentals of oil. Like, where did all that begin with you? Because it feels like it is something that's almost inherently in you.
I think the whole point of this is being transparent, right? I don't want to like
Yeah.
show. I think the reality is being rugby player, being a bit of a lad, being a bit of like whatever, that's one thing. But I think I got quite into the idea of being someone, right? At university, and I see that in a lot of graduates. They've got these aspirations to, is to the moon, right? They want to be Elon Musk. They want to be like the biggest they can possibly be. And why not, right? At that age, the sky is the limit. And I think it was very attractive to look at the oil market and think, as little as I knew before I knew about it, everyone knows oil is incredibly important to the world. And again, the transition, all that, it will happen over time, but it's very unlikely oil will actually ever really go away. And it's so embedded in our society that, you could talk about economies and all that, but really power, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the biggest countries in the world, they're fighting over oil, and they have been fighting over the oil for the last century. Every major conflict is so unbelievably linked to oil, whether you know it or not. Wars are won and lost through oil. Even right now, Russia, Ukraine, why are they targeting refineries? Why are they targeting storage depots? It's access to gasoline on the front lines, diesel on the front lines is really, really important. So I think, if I'm being honest, it was that kind of more the brutal side. Oil is so instrumental and it's so powerful and political that it pretty much felt like if you were interested in that kind of thing, I mean, oil was probably the most important thing in the world. That's how I viewed it anyway. And then, you hear your stories, you read some books around how the oil market has been operating in the last however long it was, and the big players, the billionaires, and I guess for a young someone in the young.
Yeah, there was an element of that movie version of it, right?
I mean, well, the other one, because what's very common for universities, London especially, but people in engineering, STEM degrees, finance degrees, basically they all want to be in investment banks or graduate schemes that pay the most. And liar's poker was a big thing, right? That was like a big, that was very popular at the time, getting everyone into how to make loads of money really quickly, and that's very attractive for young professionals. But for some reason, commodities just wasn't as linked, even though. And I think maybe this whole side of oil, which there is an investment banking side to oil, if you like. There's a big, big, big financial side to oil. And in fact, it's the most dominant part of oil now in terms of the prices and how it's driven. That is not, maybe it's more understood now, I don't know, but it was not understood then. So there's also a little bit of like, I found something that is so influential and powerful that actually most grads aren't thinking about. And most people say, I want to get on an equity desk at JP Morgan and all that. You think, equities are equities. Everyone knows, and everyone can trade them on their private accounts these days. But oil and commodities, for some reason, there's not the same gleam, but it's a hugely interesting area. And so I think, the combination, if you like.
That's amazing. And Greg, so obviously you embarked on that journey and you had some incredible success very quickly. I mean, your trajectory was as fast as the other sort of top tier performers at Mandara who went through. You went on to lead the crude desk, and maybe you could orientate those listening who aren't from a finance or oil background in terms of like, you know, what's the significance of crude, you know, versus say some of the other products in
I think
oil trading?
don't mind, like just before that, like it's funny because I think on a time trajectory, you know, 3 years spending at a place is like there's nothing.
No,
There, you know, we were working between 15 and 18 hours a day. And to some degree, that
it was the night bus. What you were literally getting the night bus to work and the night bus from. Well,
running at 4:45 to catch the 4:49 or something, and people puking up on the bus next to me. I relished it. You know, it's that
yeah.
whole, you know, what's everyone else doing
It was
with it?
so exciting though, wasn't it?
It was exciting, and Alf was very much like do the work, stay late, research. But I wouldn't say he insists. Like I think that a lot of it came from our cohort, and I think credit to yourself as well. We had a cohort at the end of the day, which is a very powerful thing, and it's something I've used at Onyx. It's all well and good hiring one person that you think might fit, but if you can hire a group of people that fit together, they are in this journey and they feed off each other, and it's that good competitive, you know, like you just said, you know, I went through the program. On a macro scale, I went through it very fast, but on a micro scale, I was probably the laggard, right? So if you compare to myself to like Omar, who I now in business with, you know, just loads of others, Luke, Bart, all these guys, I probably wasn't as quick as them, but you know, we're talking the difference between months, but at the time it felt like years. But because you're in and out, like every minute counts. I mean, you're literally dog years. That's how it felt. Like
And could you describe like what like a rough day to people listening in terms of like?
Yeah, so rough was, I guess because it was a startup, and again, I would always, if you're super passionate and super like believe in yourself, then you should believe that the right place for you to be is where you can be the most influential. And we've even got a couple of guys who started with us at the beginning of Onyx, and it's exactly the same scenario, Legier and Manny. And that's and I really do advise that. But anyway, so it was I think it had been going for a few years, but it was still on its kind of majorly growth phase. So you're in this small office, but again, we had to do like when I say everything, I mean literally everything, like to the point of like bringing the milk up in the morning at like you know 5 o'clock when we got in, or at least our cohort got in. And the idea was to set up the office, set up the screens, but then we had to receive the bank files, the files from the bank from our trading yesterday, making sure they reconciled, making sure they essentially it was like a kind of accounting, basically, you know, making sure that everything was as we expected it to be so that we could start the trading again. And that is a process, and that can take anywhere between 20 minutes and an hour. And then by 6 o'clock, we had the morning meeting. So it was a race against time. As soon as you got in, that you had to be prepared for the morning meeting. And again, credit to Alf, that morning meeting was taken so seriously. And it was like, that was when you were most scared. You're like, right, so if I'm on reconciliations and set up, and I have to lead the meeting, which we kind of went round to each person, you know, each day, you were under the cosh, right? It was like, oh my God, this is going to be like, and if something then the bad happened in your reconciliations, like it didn't match up and you need to spend more time on it, you were like, oh my. I said one time I was like, Alf, someone's sick, the reconciliations are like wrong or whatever, I need to sort them out. I haven't had time to prep. And he's like, well, get in at 3 a.m. then. It's like there was no getting out of it. And that was my first big.
There were no excuses, were there?
That was my first big lesson. And that's when I knew I was home. It was a combination of yourself and Alf being like, it wasn't emotional. It was like, you didn't do a good job there. Okay, that's one way of putting it. It's like, no, you didn't do your job. So it's like, your job is to do this. You didn't do it. Yeah, but I don't care. It's 6 o'clock in the morning meeting and you're assigned to it. You didn't do it. And it was this binary, like, nope, no way out. And you're thinking, oh shit. So what is this like 100% accountability, extreme ownership? I was very new to it. But weirdly, I felt at home with it because I think for my life, at least, I've been around, like my dad and brother are salespeople, you know, generally speaking, people who like to talk rather than like, it's like more a talking thing than an action thing. And I remember even saying to Alf at the end of the day when I hadn't done a particularly good job trade entering or whatever, so look, I just want to apologize. I'm gonna, you know, sort it out and tomorrow. And he just looked at me like almost like incredulous, like, what are you doing? Like, I don't care about your apologies. Just get it done. What are you gonna do to do differently? And I say, oh, I'm just gonna work harder. And that's not a tactic. That's, you know, that's doomed to fail. So we had to get into the thinking quite quickly. And again, it's something you advocated too about like how to actually, okay, you've got a challenge. How do you actually overcome that obstacle? Not just like, I'm going to work harder, putting in more effort. You know, it might be a dumb process you've got. So look at your process. So I remember one of them was like, make sure it was something like I needed to check the live P&L, the live profits. And if they ever moved out of whack, I should be the first one to pick it up and I should shout over. And I was being slow to it. So he's like, "What? How are you going to get over this?" So I ended up writing like post-it notes, basically bang in the middle of the screens, because we had like 5 screens attached to each other, being like, every 3 seconds, look to your left, look to the bottom left, look to top right. And it was just like, you couldn't, like, it was just all day just doing this, and you had that reminder. He's like, yeah, not like, yeah, well done, just like, okay, that's actually
Tangible.
yeah, that's and then review that process. And I've got to say, that has just been the bedrock of everything I've done ever since. And I'm just addicted to it. I love it. I love iteration. I love just looking at a seemingly unbelievably hard obstacle to overcome and just attacking it step by
Came
step.
very natural to you though, didn't it? That iterative process, that the method, there's almost like the application as a scientific method.
But I think it was a trust in people who, I mean, I wanted to be here. I wanted to be at this place. I clearly, I guess the key thing was I did clearly respect the people that are in front of me. And I don't know. I guess you just have an instinct for, no, I think this is the person I can respect, the way they hold themselves, all that. And therefore you listen, right? So all I've got, it's my time, and I'll absorb everything you tell me. And what's the downside? I'm gonna listen to everything you tell me. And if this person's process orientated, that means they're not politically orientated. They're not going to give me some spiel to make themselves look better and all this like dancing around like you get in an investment bank, at least what I hear. Whereas at Mandara, it was like, no, we're just all outcome focused. So if you give yourself that process, or to people who are processed, and they say, look, you've got a problem. Like, for example, if we fast forward a bit, I'm running a desk that's a very difficult desk, very efficient market. I don't know how I'm going to grow up. I'm saying this to you, or I don't know what to do. Well, okay, well, this is what kata is. This is how to overcome obstacles by experimentation and iteration. And, all is, okay, I need to learn exactly what's going, how do I do this? All right, I think I get it now. Let me give it a crack. Completely mess it up. But the great thing is someone ahead of me, James, sometimes Al, for these things, to say, yeah, I'm going to tell you it was shit, but I'm also going to tell you why. This is shit because this. And it's not an insult. And that's a big lesson as well. So 100% accountability. But then the whole feedback thing was another thing that changed my life. Is if people are giving you real feedback, that is a genuine gift. That is genuinely someone who cares. Someone who's trying to protect your feelings, they're probably only doing that for themselves because they don't like confrontation, or they, in some way, it's selfish. But if they're saying, look, cruel to be kind, that is terrible, go fix it, go back to the process, you're not doing it right. And I come back with a slight improvement. And then, again, I'll give a lot of credit to Alf, where he'd say, you'd send an email out, this random 22-year-old, and he would read every person's email in detail and say, he would actually make the point of saying, that's good. And then you're like, oh, awesome, I'm on a winner here. And that trajectory was perfect, shit to good, rather than dancing around what makes someone look better, all that crap. So once you give yourself to that process and you've got the right people around you, it's actually easy. I want to say that. Like, the only thing I think that gets in the way is people's own walls, people's own egos, people's own thoughts of trying to shortcut. It's just all bollocks. If someone knows it better than you and you're in the right place, assume those two things, then giving yourself to that process and learning what they learn, how is that? Like, surely that's the best place to start. And that is what I bought into.
Yeah, and I think that worked because that cohort, and yourself included, were able to do that. There was no sensitivity. I think it was fundamentally everyone had the same primary goal, which was get better faster. Everyone's interests were aligned.
I'll be honest, I think you're right, but I think that within our cohort, there were obviously some who weren't like that, and they were out for themselves. We can't names, but some people just couldn't get used to that accountability side of things, and I just think they're a little bit muddled with what they were trying to achieve. I think they were still in the mindset of trying to get a gold star at school, and actually, for someone who owns the business and is support people around him and yourself, you're just looking for very defined outcomes. It's actually quite difficult for some people because their mums and their school teachers and their grades have all been validation, and suddenly those A don't mean anything, and B, there is no equivalent. There is only make or lose money, and there's only advancing the business. And it's actually quite ruthless. I loved it, but a lot of people it actually was horrible for them because suddenly there was no comfort thing to seek. There was no validation.
Absolutely. You're naked to an extent, aren't you?
Exactly. A lot of people didn't like that. I would actually say, the people who didn't make it, I would argue that's probably why. But
It's probably the biggest cause. If you look at the people who have gone on to achieve the sort of things you have, Omar has, for example, you know, you could always marry up the people's alignment with that and the trajectory they've ultimately ended up generating as a trader.
I would say, yeah, the ego is the last thing to bring up, and stoicism was
I think
actually
it's a link to all that, but yeah,
that was another thing I got introduced to by yourself and Mandara. You know, this concept of ego. Everyone says the word ego, but what does it actually mean? And if you read around it, like some great stuff from Ryan Holiday, who condenses some of the Marcus Aurelius stuff and all that. It's just seeing it as an enemy, seeing it as something that's working against you. You can be very extreme with it, but it's actually so liberating when you are extreme with ego. Which is, you know, that is just my ego playing up and constantly, and that was something you would always do, right? That's just your ego. Oh, wow, that's just confirmation bias. You guys were very into the psychology and constantly putting pressure on you to like look at self-review and look at yourself. And it was almost like self-flagellation, but it was so liberating. And I go back to the people who weren't able to get on board with that. They really, really struggled because it didn't fit with their identity.
and they
Whereas
pay a price for it though, don't they? Because if you can get comfortable with that, it just dramatically increases your ability to profit from everything else in
you're
terms of your development.
clean slate. You
Yeah.
can anything but. So one thing I want to introduce is the left field, though. Having said all that, there's a little bit of low self-esteem in there. So it's like I hadn't done the best at my A levels. I had to retake. I had to go and do, sort myself out, get serious about my life, get serious about university. Okay, then I started to pick it up. Got a good engineering degree from UCL, so it was all good stuff in the end. But an element of Jesus, I'm never messing that up again, and I'm going to work hard. I'm going to take every lesson I can. And I was more than happy to be the bottom, to be the back of the pack. I was more than happy to be the last person, but I wasn't going to finish last. You know, I was just going to. Yeah, I remember Rich Froning said that was that when he did his first CrossFit Games, he was like, the only thing I want to do was not finish last. And that element of like, it's kind of low self-esteem, but it's not weak. It's just like really low expectations, and you're going to work really hard. It means every little win means so much to you. And I don't care that people around me were doing faster in the training program. It's like good for them, and I actually respect them. And I didn't have a problem with comparing myself because I was like,
Yeah.
I actually was happy being the bottom. Which
Yeah, but there you go. You're comparing you to you, aren't you? And you're tracking trajectory rather than snapshot. You're not looking at the snapshot being like, oh, I'm here versus them. It's like I'm comparing me to me, and my trajectory over the last 3 months versus the 3 months before that, and the 3 months before that is accelerating. And I think that is the most healthy way to look at it. But
well, I still see it now. I still imposter syndrome is what we kind of tend to call it now. Like
yeah,
the best people, they all have imposter syndrome, and I honestly, to a T, I've not met someone who doesn't have imposter syndrome at some degree. And it's a bit of a generic thing to say, but I guess it's what we're talking about. It's believing that they're not the finished article by any means. And again, the people who haven't made it, at least from that cohort and onwards, they could not. They just didn't. They're like, no, that doesn't fit. I don't like the feeling. I'm better than that.
and there's this good argument though that right, if you don't have imposter syndrome at times or symptoms of it, then you're probably not in the adaptive zone. And if you're not in the adaptive zone, then you're not going to have the stimulus in your brain and body to get better. Do you know? It's almost this like, yeah, of course you do. Or if you don't, why the fuck haven't you got it?
Yeah.
You know, and you're in the wrong room, sort of thing.
No, I love it, and we can say all these things like no excuses. And I remember, like I said to you, I called that. You know, the market going down $20, man. I called that. Like, how much money do you make? I was like, yeah, but I was like,
I remember.
does it matter? And it's like, oh shit.
I remember that, yeah.
But I love it, and it's again, I go back to it's not an insult. It's like calibrating, and but I just want to be clear. It's so hard to get someone to just do that. Just be this way. It's like really bashing you down to build again. I don't know if it helped that I had an older brother. I don't know if it helped that I was at boarding school, and these things are all kind of that way. You do your time. You're the lower.
You need to voluntarily almost buy into it, don't you? You can't.
100%.
I mean, how many people do you think did we have in that had the talent, but just could not adopt that mentality and therefore could not excel? By the way, trading as a craft, and it's the thing I love most about trading, and it's why I love the industry and the space so much, but it's second to none for that. Because you in sales, I think even in law, in private equity to an extent, you can create narratives and and spin things more than you can in trading. Trading is like you get a score every day, and the market is pretty brutal in that respect.
But yes, you're absolutely right. But there are forms of trading where you are given a leg up. So if you work at a bank, there'll be a customer business that essentially is in return for giving them credit or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, of course.
But
Yeah,
that's
I think of that as more like broken, but yeah, I get it's still technically say in my head though, that flow trading at banks, that to me they're brokers or sales guys rather than, they're trading off the bank's name rather than. But what we were doing at Mandara, what you guys are doing and pushing to just new levels every year at Onyx is pure. It's purest form of decision making, and it's effectively about eliminate bias at the expense of your ego, your self esteem. Eliminate bias, and you will maximize your probability of success. And if you don't do that, you're doomed.
Yeah, 100%. I think what you've done a very good job of is articulating these things. You feel them, and it was. I think another thing that was really great was like actually when people say gut instinct and when people say, "Oh, I've just got a good feel for this," those weren't banned words, but they were like, "That doesn't mean anything. Break that down." And if you do the thinking after the fact of what did that feeling actually represent? So, for example, I had quite a good instinct for, say, market direction. I was like, this is going
Yeah,
to
you
go
have an
big.
incredible instinct from that. Yeah,
Like, well, what? You're not some fucking genius. Like, what do you actually? What's your stimulus that
yeah.
you're responding to it?
The
And
heuristics we talk about and things like that.
then suddenly be like, oh right, yeah, actually, when I really think about it, it was just because of that.
Yeah.
And it's liberating because you're like, okay, so now I can kind of make that into an internal system, and then that's what eventually becomes algorithmic trading and all the rest of it. But I just think it's worth that whole articulation of your feeling and biases is another really powerful. So self-review and trying to understand that, I think it's so difficult, but we have to remember that we were really encouraged to self-review and self-critique.
Yeah, and declarative knowledge there. And that's what I was going to ask you, because obviously you've written an incredible book. And, I guess, well, in terms of what your mind or your mental structures for the oil markets, it's a book for the lay person, right? Anyone can sort of pick that up. And that's what I love most about it. But did that help you even writing that?
Oh, 100%. I love it. Yes, exactly. So
Yeah,
I wouldn't say it's quite the layperson because you really would have to define like every little thing. So I would say it's
yeah.
probably a finance professional, someone interested in finance, a grad.
You don't have to be an oil trader though, right? To read it. Yeah.
Oh, no. But yeah, going back to first principles, right? Like you had to say,
Yeah.
that was really, and even the layout, like how do I go from here to here to
Yeah.
here?
How do you structure this? What's the logical order to start from?
It was so good. And yeah, and I trying to instill it in the traders to essentially create systems within themselves, but it is difficult. Like one thing that would probably more resonate with listeners maybe and certainly traders is like, okay, fine, if you're not quite at the point where you're like rigorously self-reviewing, at least the concept of loss and fear and these negative emotions when you're trading or any performance, it must be the same thing.
Yeah, of
That
course. Like, this is inextricably linked. Whether you're an athlete, a special forces operator, this is like it's the bread and butter of everything to do with being the everything you can be.
which is emotional control. And I think that emotional control sounds like it's the absence of emotion. And I always thought that was weird. It's like the best trader is emotionless. It's like, no, the best traders I've seen are emotional, like crazy emotional,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they're able to control them in a certain way at certain times, or at least harness it. So if you can be aggressive, and so there's nothing worse, right? So you're losing money, and not only are you losing money, you this like your face goes white, you that whole blood sinking, and you realize when you realize I can't get out of this, like this trade, I'm fucked. And there's your mind and your body is trying to force you to panic, and loads of people do panic, and they just can't move.
Mhm.
And that was something I realized again, I could have an edge over my cohort who I was effectively competing with. I don't even remember Alf needed a support guy to execute some of his trades, and I think two of them just in a row just couldn't. They just
I
capitulated.
remember that vividly. It was a mental day. It was ballistic. The trading floor was like Colosseum when, especially when Alf was at it, right? And he was in one of his moods, like nicknamed Voldemort at times. But and he's like first guy from Greg's cohort was on, made a couple of mistakes, get the fuck off the desk, sort of thing. Next guy on, get the fuck off the desk. And I'm thinking, oh shit, like watching this unfold. And then I see you with a smile on your face, put your hand up, be like, I'll give it a crack, Alf. So I just jump on the desk, like bowl over. And I was just thinking, oh my fucking Lord, what's going to happen here?
It's a massive realization to me because, as you said, like I think undeniably, especially one of them was he was academically much more superior. He was a competent level, 90 out of 100 type thing, Oxford mathematician, all the rest of it.
First class Oxford, yeah, yeah.
So I knew obviously he would understand, like, but then I realized it's not actually that complicated. There's nothing to like super learn here. So it's all about your emotional control and it would hand yourself under pressure. And it just felt just like sport. You're literally clicking a button. But as you say, it's like Coliseum, it's mental. There's money attached to this, your job's on the line, I guess, kind of. And but at the same time, it's just, and then you have to talk for me here, but the whole like going back to a process, like one foot after the other, go back to your training and just, breathe, right, do it, and just suppress those emotions slightly of wanting to panic and all that. That is essentially, everyone looks at your trading, everyone looks at what you've done. And this used to happen all the time, especially when I started independently trading. Oh, you made 100 grand today or whatever. They'd be like, yeah, but all you did was that and that. And you're like, you do it then. And it's like, it's so easy to say that. And it is just that and that. But before it appears, one, you need to spot the opportunity. You need to have a clear head to do it. You then need to react, and you need to react first. Because remember, you've got all these competitors in the market.
Yeah.
There's so many things at play. It's so disrespectful to say all you did was that and that, because it takes instinct. It takes like acting, like suppressing these panic emotions, being cool and calm enough to do it, to stick to the process. I find myself like doing weird things. Like in the moment, you're like kind of like getting up and you're going, okay, like this is coming. I need to go and like get ready to buy this or sell that. And I would find weird things would help me like settle down. Like even just saying my name, like my name's Greg, it would bring me back in.
Grounding, yeah, it brings you into present.
Grounding, yeah, and all that. It's all the same stuff. So yeah, when you wrote your book, it's like it's the same thing about my, when you asked me about my book. It's at the end of the day, these things exist, but articulating it and having clarity of knowledge is so empowering, because then you can repeat it and know why one thing worked or didn't work. I'm not some weirdo muttering to myself. I'm grounding myself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think what you're saying, Greg, is so like powerful. And you've heard me rant about, I get frustrated at times with all the shit we see online about, the performance hacks and the keys to this and the keys to that, and people talking about, ice baths and meditation and kale smoothies and fucking channeling you in a Navy SEAL. But it genuinely comes back to these foundational things you're talking about. And if you don't have these things, then you can do all the fucking ice baths in the world. You can do all the meditation in the world, but you will not develop the way that you and Omar ultimately did through that program.
I would also say it's a continuous thing, because sometimes, there's ice bath people, whatever, it's like, oh, 0 to 1. Like you go from doing it, trying it, and then now you're successful. But the reality is, I think you then fall back into that 0 again. Or at least I found that.
New level, new devil, right? So that's the thing. You do that, you level up, but then the new set of problems smash you in the face, right?
Well, yes, but I meant more like you find, I've seen it. Honestly, I've seen more of this type of thing, like negative spirals in success than failure. Failure is truthful. It's, if you can take it, if you can take the feedback and learn and humble yourself, it's actually amazing. But as long as you can survive, obviously. Whereas success is horrible. I've had all the horrible times in my business from success. You get like almost cringeworthy ego. You get the most deluded. I mean, we've seen now.
We've seen it, yeah.
I would have thought would be the most, humble, like got all the criteria of a high performer, become so deluded that it's almost like they think, no exaggeration, they're like a demigod. And that is, I guess, very, very hard, because when you're making all this money, you got all these brokers saying you're amazing. You're like living off this like feedback loop of like, I'm a genius.
It's so important what you're saying again. And there's 3 things I think are really important to communicate here. One is, just like in failure, there's an equal amount of positives and negatives in anything, right? If you search for and find them. Like one of the favorite studies I love is this, they measured a study on lottery winners and people in the same time period that were amputees. Okay, temporary increase in positive emotion, temporary decrease in negative emotion. 6 months later, same base level of happiness, right? We hedonically adapt to positive and negative outcomes. However, I think there's this delusion, and I see it with athletes I work with, traders I've worked with, I've felt it myself. You achieve success, and we forget that with success comes a load of shit things as well. I've had Clive Woodward on this podcast, and we were talking about that. He was saying the worst thing ever happened to English rugby, and I think this alludes to exactly what you're talking about, was winning the World Cup. Because you win the World Cup, expectations go up, people start fighting for, well, yeah, I was part of that. One of my favorite analogies is the whole, if five guys rob a bank, and there's X amount, how do you divvy it up? Everyone, I think when you sum up the parts, everyone thinks they get 50% of the 100% pie, right? And then that creates conflict, ego, delusion. And there's two things as well, right? Two horrendous biases set in whenever you achieve success, which makes sustaining it so hard. First, the illusion of continuity. Oh, well, I was successful yesterday, so I'll be successful tomorrow. And we've seen that, right, with generations of traders that grew up in bull markets or in great trading conditions, and they just think, oh, this is easy, I've just done it. You've done it for a year, mate. You've done it for 2 years. Even you've done it for 5 years. Let's see a whole economic cycle go through. But then there's that illusion of personal control, which I think we've seen a lot of with peers and people we've managed and led in respect to that. People ignore, once they've achieved success, they ignore the 40% tailwind here and the 50% tailwind there. And they think it's all down to their own talent rather than strategy and effort. And I think that's what, when you were talking earlier about that, being able to articulate the tangible actionals behind the outcome is so powerful. And I perceive that, having watched your journey from sort of the start, to be one of the biggest edges you've got. You're someone that genuinely has a methodology you apply and adapt.
I think I just want to reiterate though, is in like, it's giving yourself to a team as well. And don't get me wrong, that team of people you choose to trust, they can go against you, manipulate you. That's any kind of trustworthy relationship. And I hope people don't, have those, but we have to say that is out there. But assuming your guides and the people you choose to help mentor you, I think you've got to pick the ones that are going to be most brutal, but brutal because there's an element of them wanting you to be good. And that,
be honest with you and tell you the truth. And I think what you're talking about there, though, it's important to look at what you're talking about there through the lens of, look, you can't expect to have trust and not to experience the other side of that. The key is like trading, right? Okay, I'm going to have winning trades, I'm going to have losing trades. The key is to be able to cut your losers and run your winners. So when you find those people that you trust who have those shared values, it's to buy that stock. And when you see these signs, to ruthlessly cut and not tolerate it.
To your point, and going on the same theme, we had a very, very, very tough time in the early years, but we loved it because we were all in it together and very small volume players, but every win was so big for us, and it was, I didn't see that as a bad thing. But when we had success, 2015, bumper year, record profit for the whole company. We'd started all these new desks and we were suddenly number one volume.
We'd arrived, right?
We'd arrived, and yeah, when me and Omar left, and then a lot of people underneath, it all became about money, and it just kind of went from there. But what I was saying was, I always had people around me, yourself, Omar, Miles now I have here. Like, there's a lot of people who I want them, and they know it's a form of friendship to be quite brutal in the sense of but you do realize all you've done is that. And it's yeah, great, but okay, you've had one good year, and okay, you want to set up a hedge fund, but you don't have a track record, and you kind of having to go back to zero, because it's not going back to zero like a backward step. It's just, okay, great, you've got that, bank it, but now starting again. Don't get confused with 1 year trading dated Brent and curve stripping around storage economics, and you make you make 7-10 million, whatever. Oh, what, now you know how to, whatever the skill, if you've got to learn this again, learn it from scratch, and there's some transferable skills, but you are just that person who did that. And I try, and maybe I'm too harsh to people here, but I really hate seeing it, because I guess that whole projection is, what do you say?
Perception is projection.
I'm I can see myself in it and go, don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah.
You're literally 25 and you've literally had one good year. That does not make you anything. That makes you a good trader at this one desk, at this
under certain conditions as well, right? Yeah.
100%. And I think if you have that, this is assuming you want to be the best of the best, because you then got to accept, okay, cool, tick, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. Some people say, I actually love this. You know, I'm going to do this again next year. Okay, maybe it dies out in the long run, but I'm a
I
celebrity.
make some money. I get, yeah.
The brokers love me. I get taken out, even if they're lying to me. I don't care. Like it's just a nice feeling. I get paid a lot. It's part of this gig economy, almost like in oil, and a lot of people are seduced heavily by that, and it's almost like this internal community, and it's very powerful, and it's very anti high performance. But the oil market is very protectionist, and so I mean, it's kind of a different topic now, but it is the death of like high performance in respect. It just makes me laugh actually because when you said the bank robber thing, that reminded me of a story when we were doing a leadership training, weren't we, at Mandara, and then we had to say like, what did you want to be when you were younger? And then like Omar said, yeah, I wanted to be a bank robber,
Yeah,
and
he did.
everyone's like, you are.
You are a bank robber. Literally, yeah, he did. He really is, isn't he? He's robbed a lot of money from the banks over the years. Sorry to interrupt the podcast, but before we dive deeper into the conversation, I want to express how grateful I am that you're voluntarily choosing to spend your time here with us. I also want to take a moment to ask for your support. I want to bring you the best podcast I can in terms of guests, engaging discussions, and thought-provoking conversations every week. And that's where you come in. By hitting that like button and subscribing to the podcast, you play a vital role. Simply put, when you hit that like button or subscribe, you enable the podcast to reach a much wider audience. And the wider the audience, the easier it is for guests within my network to convince their agents, management teams to free up their diary and come on the show. Thank you in advance for your likes and subscriptions. Now, let's get back to business. But yeah, Greg, talk to us about that, because obviously, right, so there's two sides to you. You've had this, you've performed at the upper limits in terms of as a trader, but you've also done so as a CEO. Like, talk to us about that pivot. So 2015, you've hit this as Mandara and as a set of individuals, particularly like you and Omar, who are now business partners, of course. You hit this level, but then you decide to go and set your own thing up. Like, what was so important to you about doing that?
Yeah, I was going to say like that was always on my mind, and I think I have to be honest about that. Like I did really enjoy trading. I was very passionate about trade. I still am passionate about trading and the oil markets. But no, I think you said that whole there are creators and there are repeaters, and I don't know when you said that, but it hit me because I thought I can't go and do this again. I've built this desk from scratch. It's a whole new market. It's fascinating. I've had to build a network, build a risk framework, new contracts that our company's never seen. I just love the whole journey of it, and I love seeing it come to fruition. But I couldn't just do that year in, year out. So
you're a starter, not a maintainer. Yeah.
that's it. So I just thought, you know what, like it's the next thing now. And I got addicted to that feeling of creating and business development. And if I'm being honest, got quite addicted to the lows as well, because I know that may sound very odd. But again, it's success is not necessarily a great feeling. It's like it's success knowing that what you did, if you frame it with like oh, this is the result of all this hard work, that's one thing. But if you're trying to feel good in general, it's like, no, what feels good is, adventure and pushing new boundaries. And that comes with lows. And I really enjoy now from my experience in Mandara, but I've always loved an underdog. And I loved how much we were underdogs. I loved how people tried to stop us getting in the
You
market.
just keep picking bigger fights though, mate.
Exactly. You go, well, if all you're going to do is say you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, and I've seen us do it. We were told you will never be anything in oil. We became the biggest volume.
Well, that was true, actually. It's probably important to highlight to people. Like, people did absolutely write us off, didn't they, from the off?
You're a tiny firm with 22-year-olds and one banker. Like, what are you jokers doing? And just by simple performance-based approach, iterating literally that, with an expert now and like downloading his way of trading and nothing overly complicated, just principle-based and hard work.
But then evolving it as well, right? That was the base level, but you guys have gone on to evolve the trading styles that had, I mean, even the way you were trading that crude market through that iterative process, it was a copy paste, was it?
No, it wasn't. But I think that Alf had been a repeater for a long time. He has
You'd mastered that.
Fantastic entrepreneurial instincts in some respects, but I think he had a comfort level of I want to achieve this. And I think once he'd achieved that and we'd gone and done great things with the market, I think he was happy with that. Whereas me personally, I think others were, now there's more out there, we're 26, 25, 26. Let's go and like, if we can do this, what else can we do? And so I couldn't resist that feeling or that yearn. So I had to go and look at the next opportunity. And it wasn't that it was obvious that I should set up my own business. It was just that the opportunity that presented itself was there's a gap in the market. The banks have pulled out. Mandara has proven it can fill the gap. It's smashing it. But I'm looking at the trading. I'm looking at what we're doing, and we're about a 6 out of 10. Like Alf didn't want to push the risk. Completely understand why. It was a lot to handle, and it was all very new. But when we're trading, we could go, there's so much more here. So I think it was one of those things where we've been trained to run a business. Actually, we had to do all the bank reconciliations with the bank relationships. We had to close the books at the end of the day. We had to do the risk management. We had to do the trading. So we just knew everything.
And the training. You guys as senior traders were intimately involved in trading everyone else in that organization, right?
So it was actually one of those things where it was like, you've basically been trained to set up a trading business, and the opportunity was there because of the timing and the rest of it. So I'm not saying it fell on my lap, but it was one of those things where it's like, you can do that. And it wasn't like, oh, at 26 years old, you should set up a business. It's like, no, that was the opportunity in front of me. If it had been another thing, it would have been another thing. But it was clear. If you wanted to take that opportunity, it was there. And we took it. And luckily there was quite a few people queuing up to do. They'd seen the success Mandara had, and it was a very low risk way of making returns. So it was seen as like a cash cow business. So you had investors like really keen to get involved. So we didn't struggle to find those investors. When we started, we had some horrendous ups and downs, as kind of, I guess, as people would expect. But it wasn't so much I want to be a CEO necessarily. It was I want to seize the next opportunity and keep growing. And that was the opportunity. And then I wanted the challenge. I would say I was more excited about being a leader than being a CEO. So how can you be the best?
You've always had that though, from day one, that you were a natural, more so than the other traders. Even the juniors that rotated. So for some context to people listening, junior traders would rotate across the different oil product desks, from say gasoline to crude to middle distillates, fuel oil. And your team was always the tightest, right? People loved working for you and with you in that respect. You clearly gave, from a coaching perspective as well. I think you gave more than anyone else in terms of the things we were talking about earlier, from like the mentality, but then obviously technically as well.
Well, again, it's funny. It's going back to this articulation point. I think if I look back at it, and now I come from where I am now, looking back then, I enjoyed leadership because I enjoyed other people. I enjoyed the bond, everyone together. So that means you have to care about the person next to you, so if you have
your desk always had the best bond, didn't they?
Well, this is it. If you could say, this is what we are doing, and this is bigger than us. And then get people excited about that. Oh yeah, that sounds exciting. And then it's like, what is your role within that? I think that came quite naturally. But then, at the end of the day, you're still young and figuring it out. Now I realize, a lot of this is the skill of storytelling. And the skill with storytelling is you can't be the hero in your own story if you want people to really buy in and really listen or enjoy the story. They need to be the hero and you need to be the guide. And there needs to be obviously downs and ups and struggles. There needs to be a villain. And I think starting to realize all that, it's like those things were all adding up. It was, we're not meant to be in this market. We've got these bully big boys who are constantly trying to push us out. We keep getting told we can't do it. We're young, we're stupid, we don't understand the underlying market. The amount of times being told that, it's like, well, we're doing pretty well for people who don't understand the underlying market. Then it's just all this defensive stuff. So the villain was clear. The villain was people who think we can't do it. And the opportunity was obviously to do the next new thing. And so it all lined up, but then it's what's your role within that? And I think it's quite easy. And I've seen my direct competitor, for example, make it all about himself. And that is you cannot do that, I've realized, and
we've seen the effects of that now as well, right?
And I think me and Omar doing it together was crucial. It has to be, Omar is a, phenomenal trader. You're
complementary though, in terms of
but it's so complementary that I love calling him the best trader. He is an exceptional trader. He blows everyone away. He got back on the desk the other week and shows everyone what he can do. And that's his, that's so powerful. It's like that person in battle,
He's savant, isn't he? He's almost like the Messi of that relative value derivatives trading. He's that.
That's what I'm saying. So everyone gets a big lift, and I love that for him. But then he also loves my thing for me. And I think that lack of getting in each other's way, and we flirted with the whole co-CEO thing. And I was like, well, look, you know, I actually just want to do this 100%. And, you know, you should run the trading. That's what you're great at doing. And he was there's just no issues. And
He
I,
calls you his boss, doesn't he? He's like, yeah, it's my boss.
yeah, it was funny. He was trying to wake me up at like 2 in the morning, and it's like in Sri Lanka when they were having a party, where I went to bed early, and he's saying to his mates, like, "Stop pushing me, man! You're gonna get me fired." It's obviously just banter, but it's in like
Yeah.
the comfort level with knowing where we stand. I think, and the mutual respect is so important. But I think more important than that, it's for everyone else knowing there's no one person dictator here who just there's no CEO deity. There's no, like, you know, you get that in other
There's
firms.
concordant leaders, and you're leading in your own concordant way, right?
I know, but I'm saying, like, for example, Brewdog apparently was like that. You know, it was all about like, oh my God, the founder is just a genius. He's amazing. And you'll have to think that.
Yeah.
I don't, we have that here because one, there's two, and two, there's like partners who did it with us. And we need to maintain that, like, we are all doing this and everyone's got their role. My job as CEO is it's more, I am the face, I'm making top level strategic decisions, but I can't just like overwhelm Omar, right? He's an equal partner and he disagrees with me all the time. And I think that's important for people to buy in, because if it's just about supporting someone else, it becomes a little bit submissive and it becomes a little bit like, oh, okay, so this is just making you look good.
I've also think you've both veered into the areas and the roles that you are truly concordant with, rather than just say rising to a level of incompetency or doing something because you should at this stage of your career. You both stay so true, and that's why from my perspective, that's a big reason or big driver behind the success you're having.
It is, and I think actually I've got credit of our older financial director before, not the one now. He actually said I was having a tough time 2019, messing around the market, just scratching around. Ironically, I actually had a position on that would have performed really well, but I was messing around, like not messing around, working hard, but trying to build all the other businesses at the same time. So I was trading full time and trying to build like 3 or 4 businesses alongside it whilst training people. And it wasn't that I didn't love doing all those things. The financial director just suddenly said to me, "Is like, you know, you can look at the numbers, right? Like, you're not having a great time and you're putting so much effort into it whilst trying to build these things. It's like, for the business, what is the best thing for the business? Because you can add, you know, 10x to the valuation, which is like 100 times what you can do when you're trading, by dedicating your full time to this." And that was such a bit, it was like, that was ego again. It's like, why am I still trading? The only reason I'm still trading is because I want to be the trader and this, you know what I mean? It's bullshit. And like, this is what you're meant to be doing. This is where your skills lie, and go and do it. And I think that was, as I said, it's not 0 to 1. You keep flirting with this. And I think I was going back into the I can do it all thing. But as soon as I said, no, I'm a CEO and I'm going to let go of that exuberance of being a trader and all the rest of it, it was a very important moment in my life and career and Onyx. So yeah, and it was important.
And since then, I mean, all the ideas were set and the seeds were sown before 2019. But like, maybe you give some context to people listening, because Onyx is more than it. I guess it's an extremely entrepreneurial organization. It's way more than just a trading floor, even in the terms of, like, not just the styles of trading have expanded rapidly, the products you're trading, but then there's all these different arms to the business. Would you mind just talking us through that, like, platform that it's become? Because it's in a short time, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, I think the other thing is like, when you obsess about something so deeply, and that discipline sets you free concept. I love it, because anyone can look at a business and say they do this and they do that. Okay, fine. So we were basically trading the forward curve. We were market making, proprietary trading, whatever. Okay, that's what we're doing. That's all you're doing. So, well, is it? Because we understood our markets intricately well because of the way we traded. And then from there, it suddenly became so obvious how you build around that. Like, okay, we were treated like the bottom of the rung as market makers, like I said before. And so you would go to broker events, go to industry events, and you'd be at the bottom left corner, you know, you sit over there type thing. And I started thinking, I didn't actually know, because obviously people don't want you to know this, but someone blurted out, well, yeah, they are your biggest brokerage payers in the industry. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, we're the biggest bigger than the biggest oil traders in the world, Vital, bigger than BP, bigger than Shell. I was almost like, no. So I started to look in. We were the biggest by far. And not just one brokerage, every single brokerage, of which there's like 40 brokerages. So I was like, okay, so if we're paying all that money and we are so important to the brokers, Okay, what else are we important to? Oh, the exchange. We're paying an inexorbitant amount of fees to the exchange. We're making a lot of people rich here, and we're being made to feel like we're at the bottom of the rung. Something's not right. So when we're told you don't understand the market and all this crap, but that doesn't add up with the biggest volume players paying the most amount of money to someone. So I think from there, I was like, we've got to rethink this. Like, what is our role in this game? And it became obvious to me that because we're trading so much volume, it's about the volume. It's about, if we're doing all the trading, what does that represent? So what that represents is information, right? Data. It represents a growth story, that the market is really growing. So if you combine those two, so where does this go? So, well, we're kind of like a broker slash trader as well, in the sense that, like, we're facilitating all these deals. So rather than call us like a prop trader, we're more of like, we're providing liquidity, which is a more well-known saying in finance as a role. So I was like, okay, we can actually get an identity here. So that's what I was saying. Look, let's be proud of our identity. We're not the bottom of the rung. We are the biggest volume players in the entire world. This little old Onyx are, the biggest liquidity providers in the world. And suddenly that was actually a very powerful thing to say. And then from there, it's like, okay, so what can you do? Well, you can actually sell data. You can sell the trading you're doing if you rejig it and make it show the market's position. You can show where the market is trading. You can sell price data, volume data, all the rest of it. And then it became obvious that, well, there's loads of different services that, whilst might not be our direct expertise, as you said, we train all the time. So we can offer learning and development. We can offer a brokerage service that actually teaches you where the curve is. We can give trade ideas. We can be real specialists in this financial game. And then we developed our own unique way of trading, of research, which is analyzing the financial oil markets. And that was the big one for me, because everyone like BP, Shell, Vitals, all these places are saying, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm saying, yeah, but this financial market that we trade, it's now 10, 15 times bigger than the physical. It's actually driving the physical market. That means that if we're doing the most volume in the most influential part of the financial oil market, so of the oil market, then we must have a phenomenal strategic position of knowledge and data and understanding to completely reverse the script. And actually, what was so nice about that is, a few years later, after we started the research that was very targeted to this area, the biggest research houses started copying us. And now they're buying other businesses and trying to get data to compete with what we're doing. Whilst we were told, it's not about that, it's all about the essence, supply and demand, it's all about this. Now they're copying us. I thought that's so validating. So then it was like, okay, so you can offer research data, but where is this going? And then it started to evolve the story. I'm thinking, no, this market is so big, so influential. More people need to know this. More people need to understand that it affects everything in our day-to-day lives. So if you go and say the oil price is $80, that doesn't mean anything. There is plastic prices, diesel prices, gasoline prices, supermarket prices get impacted by what they can import, electricity, generators, all these things. Like everything you look at outside, there is an end user product in oil connected to it. And there's actually a contract, a financial contract attached to it. It's just people don't really understand this. So it's become like, okay, let's massively scale this industry and this market. How are we going to do that? Well, if we open it up to investors and retail and everyone who trades, and they actually become aware of this market, it is enormous, the opportunity of what we can get this to do. And then we need it to digitize. Like, it's too old school. There's just slow broking, voice broking. There needs to be screens. There needs to be data. Blah blah blah. So it became digitize, democratize, and scale. And the democratized angle is just about saying, well, look, we're going to be super open about everything that's going on. And I've got no bones about telling everyone exactly how the oil market goes, because I don't owe these guys fucking anything, right? As in, they didn't want me in the first place. They've never helped me on the way. When they get annoyed at me now, and they call me up. Why are you saying this? Why are you saying that? Fuck off. At the end of the day, like, what do I owe you? I'm just using public available information. It's definitely within the public interest. And I need
100% is in the public interest, yeah.
I need to get everyone involved in seeing this. And if people can more understand it, and people can more understand how this crucial market works, then people can trade it themselves if they want to. They can manage their own hedging.
That's incredible, isn't it? So the retail aspect there is just incredible. No one would have believed that was happening.
Exactly. But investors, even, it's like they're just trading oil contracts against, a given, BP. It's like, well, what about plastic prices against, petrochemical producing equity? You know what I mean? Like there's so many nuances if you can trade all these contracts around the world for all these different products. So that's become this big story now, where it's saying if we can provide access, transparency, and education, this is gonna blow up this market, and it's gonna be so big, and we can be right there facilitating it. And that's now the journey, the story, and that's what I'm super excited about. And so
I'm not
that's
surprised. It's incredible.
it came from. It all came from this hyper disciplined approach to the minutiae of the market from Mandara times. And isn't that funny? It's just
So
about
funny. And almost the mindset you would take to those moments where you're sat there looking at this new market that no one was making money in at Mandara in terms of the way we're trading crude. It's almost that same methodology you've taken, but on this like bigger playing field to the oil space. To then break it down and then find these, well, what if we could do that against that, and just experiment it through. It's incredible.
To bring it back to your stuff, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what it is. What I was trying to say at the beginning of that whole ramble was like, okay, from the face of it, it just looks like we're doing buying that against selling that. But any business and any concept, if you iterate enough, can evolve. So I think businesses are only restricted by the lack of vision, right? And the lack of knowing
100%.
your core, what you're actually doing and building upon that. Like that famous that movie McFounder or whatever, about the McDonald's.
Yeah.
And they turn around, you're in the wrong. You don't realize what business you're in. You're in the real estate business. You're not in the burger business, and things like that. It's starting to understand, and I just love it.
I've always loved the Lego example of that one. I think it illustrates it really clearly. That whole, when the new CEO came in, I forget his name now, Danish guy, but he was the big message was, we're not competing against other toy companies. We're competing for children's attention. Our competition is Disney. It's, and that's where the Lego movies were all born from, right? And it's just
genius. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole social media thing, like guarantees attention. That's every business now, isn't it? And I've got my podcast for that reason. And I mean, it's just so liberating to be able to communicate directly with people. And they may not choose to listen to you, but at least you get the chance to tell your story these days.
You give them the option to hear it, right? Because people are out there searching for the truth and searching for knowledge and searching to, I think there's some of the just key words you were talking about there in terms of democratization, digitization. These are just things we need to be doing so that we can all make the world better faster, whether that's just making things more transparent and fair. And but these are just crucial things for society, full stop, I think.
I like that, because it's like, what's the underlying driver here? Like, why do these things? Everything is on a pathway to efficiency, I think. And so you're either slow.
It's evolution, isn't it? That's the whole point.
Literally. Yeah.
In line with nature, and that's a healthy place to be, as Mr. Dalio would say. But Greg, can you talk us, like, I just wanted to ask you, like, in terms of when you look back at your career, and I guess you could look at this through the lens of as a CEO or as a trader, but is there like a peak experience for you? Is there a moment where you've just been like, I was all over it there? Like, we talk about this flow state, my attention 100% on the task at hand, I'm feeling good, and I'm delivering everything I've got.
God, that's a hard one. I mean, there's a few moments that come to mind, but I think it was Mandara. I mean, when we started to, was it 2013, 2014, and summer 2015? I was trying to build this new area that we hadn't traded. Seemed like the Wild West, super complicated, and required all this like conceptual thinking and new models to be built to price it and things like that. That coming to fruition and then like capturing. It was in November 2015. And there's actually a chapter in a book about it, because the guy was reading, he was like 40 crude oil trades, and I was one of them. And it was during that time.
We'll put a link into that.
And it was like, it felt like a bit like I was saying with the assessment centers, is like it's all come to this moment. Everything you've been working for, everything that you set up is now this trade right now. It's the next 2 weeks, I think it was. And it was just bam, 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 all day, every day, coming in the morning, not even the slightest bit tired, just pumped, ready to go. And then all into the night, go to sleep, and just no problems. It was just so much fun, but fun in the sense of, because I was in the flow state. And then it was weird. It got to the end of the 2 weeks. I remember it was a Friday night, and I went to the pub with my number one broker, now at my wedding and all the rest of it. And
shout out to Mr. Ballack.
No, he was actually Luke Guttridge.
We'll cut that out.
PBM. But anyway, no, I remember I went over to where he was, and he was all around his cronies, and it was kind of a traditional thing to do on Friday night, go to their area, their pub, and everyone was kind of there. And he was holding his pint of Guinness, and he was just looking like, kind of like shaken. And I hadn't realized that if I'd had a massive 2 weeks, he'd had a massive 2 weeks. And we had just blown away the records. It was a record month for PBM, the biggest broker in the market. And I think a lot of people had done well, but we were like definitely the number one, or at least very much up there. And it was this, I just didn't realize. And that, going back to that kind of like bonding thing, it's like his career just taken off as well. He was just going, oh my, and he was on fire as well. He was in the flow state. Every order, bang, 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 bang.
Yeah.
And we didn't even realize, we didn't even have time to talk, which we usually do. Usually we talk shit all throughout the day. We were just 2 weeks solid of just doing deals. And to suddenly crystallize it on that Friday night and be like, wow, it was amazing feeling. That was probably the best, I would say, looking back at it. And it was the beginning. I knew it was the beginning of my.
You turned a corner, you sort of crossed the bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess on the other side of that is that redhead, that metaphorical sort of kick in the nuts. And I know you've alluded to some of those more developmental challenges you went through, but was there an acute moment where, and you touched on it, I guess, a little bit, but is there a moment that stands up where you're like, oh, fuck, what am I going to do here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've had actually, unfortunately, too many.
Yeah.
I would say, again, I feel it's a little bit of a byproduct of pushing the boundaries as well, right? And I think in the early days,
you can't push boundaries, can you? Again, another really important point I think you use is this: you can't push boundaries if you're not comfortable with getting stuff wrong or failure, or you've got ego. You just can't push boundaries.
yeah, this was it. So early on in Onyx, we pushed to trade. God, it's so random, the technicalities, but it was a contract trading in yen, but it was like the same contract. So it was a Japanese exchange in oil contract in yen that you just arbitraged against the dollar contract in US. So it's relatively simple, but you have foreign exchange risk. And we had built up this enormous position that was expiring essentially against us. And it was basically a back office error in effect. But we hadn't realized, we couldn't reconcile. The reconciliations were so basic and it was so early in the company. Basically, I'd made 4 million in 3 months, thought, oh, I'm smashing it. We started this business. I can now pay for everything. Omar can now start and start to smash it. And he was. And then it was like, oh, yeah, you just lost all that money. And I was actually down 1 million. I was like, oh, my God. So obviously, is that feeling, that sinking feeling. But I'd gotten really into the idea of, it's not about going and starting up this business and making loads of money. It's about like testing myself as a leader and if this business can become a proper business and we can build this together. And I remember thinking, oh, this is your challenge. This is it now. Like, this is literally what you've signed up for. You didn't sign up for how amazing am I? I've just been successful. You signed up to be the leader. And it was a big, big moment for me. And I just remember thinking it myself, how almost like faking leadership, but that is leadership. Do you know what I mean? It's in like going like, right, stand up, take ownership, address the whole firm, of which there's 8, 9 people. So look, this was a mess up. This is a fuck up. There are a number of issues here, but at the end of the day, I've got to take 100% responsibility. And it was, essentially, first of all, let's get out of this. We called up a bank. They ripped us off, obviously. But, take your medicine. And I had this feeling at the back of my head anyway, coming up to that point, that things were just going too well, too early. And as much as I'm talking from the point of view of, oh shit, what I'm going to do, I actually did know what to do. It was get in at 6 every morning, leave like the latest possible moment, and know the banking system inside out. We're never having this situation again. I stopped trading for 6 weeks, and it was just like militant, like with my team. And actually, it's now my wife who worked with me to do, and we formed a bond on that, because if it'd been, it could have become a best friend or whatever. But
see, in every failure,
exactly,
sparks that the positivity exists.
But I think the difference there is having, and that was unusual. I have to give her a lot of credit. Why are you so faithful to someone you've effectively only really met? She has that in her personality, right? Let's get to the grindstone. Let's figure this out. Let's just not bitch and moan and go for it. And there was about a team of 4 of us. And actually, one of the guys out of that 4 used to leave at 6 when we all left at 10. And he was probably the main reason why, he was behind a lot of this stuff. And I just thought, that's the difference between, you and us, right? Like, as in, we want to get through this. We're willing to embrace the downtimes as well as the good. And, it was painful and it was, embarrassing, and we had to build all the way up. And when I came back to the market in 2017, it was the worst year ever for crude trading. It was terrible volatility. It was just it was just really, really, I was almost looking back, how did I ever make money? And you have all these feelings.
Mhm.
And I would just obsess over the book, breaking down every single trade, bringing it into different strategies. What's the residual risk? Writing reviews like every day, pretty much. And it set me up for a great 2018. It set the desk up, and now my wife, actually, the trader on the desk who now took over Crude in 2019. She then had massive years in 2020, 2022. It was all kind of built from those foundations of those
I think
early.
that's so important what you're saying, Greg, because I guess to those of you listening, maybe you naturally listen to Greg talk and you think about, right, okay, well, this is on a trading floor, but it's exactly the same if you're an athlete or you're in the military, or you have these tough times where you'll temporarily be in those moments where you're like, how did I even do this before? And how is this going to happen moving forward? But what you're talking about there in terms of doing those deep dives, sticking to the basics, like there is an opportunity to profit from those tough times if you stick with it and you apply the right mentality and behaviors.
Well, I remember someone saying that, and one of our investors, actually, we had like a big group of them. And one said, how do you think Goldman's got built? Goldman's is the pinnacle of, investment banking. It's like, he was there and he said, a lot of their things were born from failures. Like, you then have built these like incredible systems to make sure this never happens again. And by definition, that's now a very solid, so as long as you
That
survive.
mindset is the anti-fragility, right? To an extent, it's like, well, if you take that mindset, then you can become, it's like that classic, every time an aircraft crashes, it becomes safer to fly. And if you take that mindset to your life in terms of making sure you extract the learnings rather than just deny and be like, oh, no, 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 it was because of this, it was because of that, it was him, it was her. It's like, no. And that's one of my favorite questions to full stop is whenever there's a problem is, how are you part of the problem? And was it a lack of knowledge? Was it a wrong attitude, unprofessionalism? But you are always part
Yeah,
of the problem and you're always part of the solution.
going back to that incident, I knew it was pushing the business too hard. It was too much FOMO. What's everyone else doing? I want to get back into them. Just pushing the team, and I knew it. And it was just not a moment to wallow. It was a moment to get stuck back in.
And do you think that definitely helped you set the foundations in terms of your systems, processes, and the way you do business for the success that you've gone on? Because it has been pretty incredible, the numbers you've produced.
That is what I was going to say. Is in like, if I compare, so Mandara was still around then. We were competing with them. We had about basically there's probably like a group of 4 or 5 main competitors doing exactly the same thing. And I would say we fell kind of to the bottom of that rung with this incident. Omar was starting to smash it. Our desk came back as well after time, and we were doing fine. But what was working in an almost like a dormant way in the next few years was we were doing kind of this. Other businesses have started to say less necessarily stronger and maybe making more money. But underlying, they were doing that, right? I think the big difference is we had formed a very strong bond between a group of at least 5 of us. We were going to have each other's backs in the worst possible moment. And so when we trained and when we built upon that, there was no ego again. There was no like getting carried away because we wanted to do things right. And I think it was actually quite painful for a long time. We had Luke join us in I believe it was 2018, which was massive for us. But again, why did Luke join us? He was a propane trader. He could have joined anyone. The way he defined it to me was like, he'd been screwed over a couple of times and he hadn't been paid his bonuses. The business he was at had gone under, even though he'd made money. He just said to me, like, I just want to be somewhere I'm not going to get screwed over. I was like, well, that was important because clearly the work I'd done years before to have integrity had paid off in the end. And that's the way I rationalize it, at least. And then, once he got on board and we started to have really good momentum, then I would still say we were still possibly lagging behind. But so we started to get really behind each other, and then we started to really fly. So when the big years came, like the big market conditions, 2020, 2022, we were just there ready, and we took it, and we just kind of built from there. And that gave me the confidence to go after these new business ideas. It just gave me the confidence to lead this business where I could see the other businesses were actually suffering from their success. It was like, well, what do we do now? And it was all about people wanting to get paid and wanting to know their like
Wobbling over that rather than thinking, how do we build the pie? How do we do this? How do we do that? Yeah.
great quote. Apparently, it was between Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. They used to argue, about which is a better firm. And Goldman's used to say, well, the thing with Morgan Stanley is they fight over how to cut the pie before it's been baked, and we bake the pie and then we figure out how to cut it after. And it's kind of that, I would say. And we've obviously had tricky moments, but I would say underlying our principles, we started to say, again, how do you articulate what our values are? A lot of people talk shit with their values, like, oh, I remember
It's
this
horrendous.
broke out like integrity, trust, and we're like, is that not? Whereas when we say resilience, accountability, humility, those are three things I learned from my experience all the way back to 2012 and yourself and the assessment centers, all the way through to all these incidents at Onyx. So when we say those things, okay, they might not speak for, how to create a big business, but they speak for who we are as people. And no one's not going to have, at least at the top, everyone's got to have those traits.
But there's so much substance and story behind it as well.
Yeah,
Right.
and I just live by that. And look, it may not go to the moon or whatever you want to call it, but at least it's the right way, right? It's the process, it's the iteration, it's the underlying principles, and then you've got to admit there's a shitload of luck to a lot of what we do, and in everything.
Both ways.
Yeah, exactly. So let's see for the future. But again, it's just so fascinating to talk it through and then go. It's actually so simple, the early stage principles and the articulation of those principles, and they can become these amazing things in so many different facets. This is oil trading. It's very random compared to 100-meter sprinting, but it's so similar as well, right?
Of course it is, yeah. The principles are the same, right? Primary context changes, but the principles that will drive success will be the same. And like 5 years from now, then
5 years from now, there's always a part of me when people ask me that, like, what are you trying to do? It's like, I think it's a dangerous question because I understand why if you have a tangible goal, it's a lot easier to fit. And that was another thing that you used to say. You've got to have a stretch goal, but you've got to define it, because the more it's defined, and it might be uncomfortable, but the more it's defined, it's actually more likely to happen. I get that. And I think there's an element of, I know what those things are. But if you are guiding yourself under these iterative principles and you have a big enough, story and ultimately wider goal and aspiration, then what it actually becomes, does it need necessarily defining? Is it an IPO where we try and, become worth multi-billions? Is it, are there downsides to that IPO? Whereas there's, all the pressure from public company ownership and public shareholders and silly things and getting involved in the, societal trends and letting them influence you. And that moves you away from the core of who you are as a business. Or is it essentially, growth by acquisition and trying to grow into a behemoth? Or is it consolidating and keeping this? There's so many different ways we could go.
play the set of cards you're going to be dealt based
Correct.
on your principles
And the experimentation element to it, right? I mean, this is what Jeff Bezos goes on about all the time. Like he says, you guys all see all these things that work, Amazon Prime, blah, blah, blah. But what about the ones that just did not work at all? And I think the trader in me and the traders in us is we're allowed to try these experiments with a stop loss. If we put a couple million into this, we don't want to waste that 2 million. But if we learn a hell of a lot doing this new thing, if it makes sense, basis the core of what we do, the trading engine, then there's got to be something that we benefit from it at a minimum. But on the flip side, if it does perform, we've just created a new business line, we've just grown our business in a diversified way, and that could become the next thing and the next thing. So I think we have to maintain that day one mentality that Bezos talks about. And what's the point of saying it has to be this, it has to be that? We want it to be as successful and as dominant as we can be. If there's one thing I would like to say that we've achieved, it's actually changing the market. This whole democratization, leveling the playing field, we're not intending to be a charity or anything, but the byproduct of being able to say, we've made it so much more efficient and accessible for everyone around the world. We've actually made it more, even from a, price perspective, harder to push around. We've made it, again, the accessibility, the transparency. Governments have been allowed to operate more astutely because of it, because of the transparency. That being able to say we were part of that, how do you want to call it? 5 guys in a room in 2012 who went on to change the oil market. That for the benefit of everyone else, that would be an achievement. And I think we can do it. But obviously, as I say, we're not a charity. It is about doing it for the benefit of Onyx as well. But it's something I would love to.
Scorecards, valuation, and profit to an extent. Yeah,
exactly.
You're certainly doing well there. Great. I wanted to ask you a few quick fire questions.
Okay.
Stand by. Favorite movie?
The Departed.
Favorite series?
Um, True Detective season 1.
Favorite book?
Probably Harry Potter 7.
You have a favorite quote or mantra?
Discipline sets you free.
Yeah.
Or big dreams, big actions.
Big dreams, big actions. Yeah. I mean, I remember that day vividly as well. When we were talking about our own winning behaviors right back at Mandara, and we talked about what were the things that got us to where we are.
Yeah, can I change my answer to the book? Actually, I think that's my childhood favorite, and that's always like a comfort thing. I want to read it to my kid one day as
Yeah.
well. But the most important book, let's say, rather than favorite, "Obstacle is the Way," which is the Ryan Holiday. Basically, he's talking about stoicism, but it's the whole. Actually, every obstacle can be turned into something that benefits you. Even like having polio and being disabled, becoming the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
You do anything you can when an obstacle presents itself to not just turn it, not just overcome it, but make it work for you. I think that is so powerful, and I've lived by that. That book is so good.
I can't explain how important that point and that mentality is. I'm actually starting work on my second book, and there's going to be a huge section about that and how to tangibly adopt that. For me, it's just the root cause of anything great that happens.
Yeah.
Is there a greatest performer of all time? We've talked about athletes, entrepreneurs, traders, investors. Is there someone that you...
Yeah, it's a really tough one, but there's like the obvious ones. Like I love the way Elon Musk is doing what he's doing. It's the new thing. It's risking all his earnings to go and set up a rocket business. The audacity to do it, and to have his principles of leadership and aspirational goals to go and apply it. I mean, it's just amazing. But I think a weird one would be Matt Damon, because I know it's so random. But
Damon, wow.
yeah, he's a bit, basically. I know like a lot of his films, and I close to saying Good Will Hunting instead of The Departed, but he was in both. And he wrote. It turns out he wrote Good Will Hunting, and I think other people get credit. Like
Never knew that.
He wrote it in Harvard, and he ended up leaving Harvard a year early. I think it was Harvard. And but it was script writing was one of the things he was doing, and he'd given like this manuscript or like a version of it, and his professor was like, you gotta finish this. This is so unbelievably good. And he basically quit university and pursued an acting career. And one of his breakout roles was Good Will Hunting, the one he'd written. And he essentially was told, Ben Affleck was his friend, but he was the superstar. So he was going to be the main actor, and he was going to be rewarded by being a support actor. But they tested, it actually just makes more sense for this guy to be the main actor. So he essentially became an A-list star in movies by writing himself into Hollywood. He got the Oscar with Ben Affleck for it. And then when you hear him talk, and when he talks about roles and his approach, he always seems to, he just has such a high performance way of looking, I think, at acting, and he's very professional. And he talks about having to do films that are just, he knows they're crap when he's in them, but it's too late. But he's a professional. He has to go in, clock in his 12-hour days and do it. And he's just got such a diversified, amazing career. But then he's also super passionate about where he's from. And he said his dream role was The Departed, because it was Boston. He was from Boston, and he grew up there. It was a lot of the impetus for his writing and Good Will Hunting and things like that. And so, all the anecdotes he has behind it, the way he talks about Jack Nicholson, where he was like writing things into his ad lib and things like that. I just love it. I just think he's like a super high performer. I know it's really random, but I just love it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That was interesting to find out. I'm going to dig into that a bit more. What about, another area you're passionate about? And to be honest, Greg, we'll have to get you back on again, because I think there's so much more we can touch on in terms of this topic. But like, is there a greatest leader of all time for you?
Greatest leader. I mean, that's a harder one. When you put this on the spot with this, I'm sure I've got a good answer, but like, I need to think about it. I mean, one that comes to mind is Churchill, because again, I know there was some sides of him that was, if you look now, there was like racism in there, like he's had some pretty dodgy quotes and things like that. But again, it's judging someone in a different time. But whatever, there's obviously downsides. He messed up Gallipoli, got a lot of people killed and things like that. I've heard all these different sides to it, but at the end of the day, to take on the leadership reins, having all these fuck ups in the past. And then he was the only one, it seemed like, at least how history tells it, who was able to say, no, we are not giving in to this guy. You know, the bully boy guys, I can relate it to my market, you know, don't do this or do this, and we're going to get away with that. And he refuses to give in. That resilience, but, you know, he says in one of his quotes, right, never give in, never, ever give in, except for, what is it, except for good sense, essentially, and reasons of honor. So he's not a reckless idiot being like, oh, we have to do this because it's my own ego. He's saying, I know I'm judging this on a good sense basis. I'm judging this on an honor basis. We cannot give in to this man. And standing up against the whole party and his, you know, everyone's scared and everyone's looking like, I don't want to do this. You know, I'm scared. And him basically saying, no, look, we're gonna keep going. I just, the courage in that. I mean, it's actually impossible to fathom how much courage is involved in that. And so yeah, it probably has to be him, right? At the end of the day.
100%. Great suggestion there. What about greatest team of all time?
I think the most enjoyable team is Man United's treble team, because I've watched Man United play when I was 3 and I ended up being a Glory supporter. But to actually, like, you know, look back at like, the treble winning,
Better than the class of 2013.
yeah.
Elite beaters.
Yeah, the Mandara times. No, yeah, I mean, it was just, again, what's fascinating about it is, like, obviously Ferguson being the leader he is, could have seen him as a leader. Again, not overly complicated about his tactical side of things and whatever else, but just good, strong principles, turning around a team that was drinking too much, apparently, you know, losing, you know, had a big brand name, he had to turn it around. But then the treble team, you know, he backed these only a couple of years before, right? Backed all these youngsters. And they were coming good, and that bond they had, and, you know, looked really tough. You know, they were trained really hard, and they were, you know, everyone can just say how easy it must have been, I guess, or they had this player, they had that player. But if you go and watch the documentary on Amazon, or you read about it, or you were there, it's like, what an amazing story and what an amazing team, right? And everyone had to play their role within that team. So
You had all the characters and archetypes, didn't you?
you do, but I think another thing is like, if you're not going to be the CEO, or you're not going to be the leader you want to be necessarily in a particular team, you can sulk about it and you can have a coup and you can be, you know, and there's elements of that, right? And maybe that's the right time to do it in some certain scenarios. But if you can respect the person in charge enough and say, okay, it benefits the business or benefits the team if I submit to this, you know, ultimately that's the leader. And I'm not going to agree with what he says 100% of the time, but I know if I am a form of leader, the whole team is going to benefit by passing on his decision and backing that decision and not making it difficult. And I think that with Keane and that with all like the Scholesies and all these players who it would pass down, it was very
Michael as well, yeah.
hierarchy. And I think if you don't have that within a team, I don't know how you're meant to be a well-functioning team. And I always go back to that army analogy of, like, if you try and get an army to turn left and it doesn't, it turns right, you're not going to be effective. Like, there was that story in World War II when they were invading through Sicily, and then they asked one of the generals to kind of block off the Germans who were defending Sicily from the top as well. And he went nah and turned left and went to Rome, just to sack Rome the day before D-Day and get all the accolades. And lots of people ended up dying during that because of his own ego. And you know, how are you meant to be effective when you've got generals doing stuff like that? So when I look back at that treble team, you know, it's a football team, not an army, but at the same time,
Yeah.
one had to
And it's a
play.
very visible one, wasn't it? I think for everyone in our generation, like, I'm not a Man United fan, but you can't help but like admire that team. You grew up watching it. It was unique, wasn't it? It stood out and again in one of the most competitive sports in the world.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be, yeah.
If you could have a coffee or a pint with any historical figure, who'd you choose?
I think that it would be Elon Musk. There's just so much going on there. I need to know, like, how he thinks, or I think he could take any subject and he would be interested enough in it, and he would have an interesting approach to it, and he would actually be willing to change his mind on what you say. He would have an open enough mind. So I remember seeing this video of him talking about his rocket to some like kid who was like videoing him, and he questioned some particular point, and he said, oh, you know, I can't remember exactly, but, you know, this thruster or whatever, we've done it this way because of this. But he was kind of thinking as he was saying it. And the next time, like a year later, the kid filmed him again, and he said, yeah, I changed that because of that conversation we had. I just think, like, someone who's willing to come into a conversation to be that open-minded and that, like, mutual respect, yet have all this
The
power.
humility there, yeah.
It's just like he's just about the outcome. Even though he's not historical, I just think that would be so interesting. And the only thing that links me to his links are interesting to him is Glencore, a big business in trading. They do oil trading, but they're big in metals. He's looking at this problem saying, we're going to need so much lithium and copper and all the rest of it to build electric cars. And, even satellites, whatever, it's going to be about natural resources and metals. It's so hard to find these things. It's not like there's not an abundance of it, but it turns out there's this big game of trading and accessing and delivering these metals. He's like, right, I'm just going to buy a quarter of Glencore. And I don't think it happened, or it didn't happen, but I think it's public now. There was a proper discussion about him saying, that's just the audacity of that, right? This huge company and saying, okay, I've got this problem. Wouldn't it just be easier if I buy into a business that its whole job is to deliver this metals, So
Thank God he bought Twitter.
yeah, well, yeah.
Greg, last question. Okay. If you could drill one message into people listening to this, people who maybe want more from themselves, but perhaps have had a wobble, or just maybe they're having a bit of plateau, but they know they've got more to give, what would be the one message you'd slam home?
One message. It's definitely resilience, right? Great. You've got to keep going no matter what. But you've got to find your reason. And as long as those two are there, as long as you're sensible, it's hard to answer it in one thing, but I guess it's the keep going.
Yeah, the series of things, fine.
If you believe in enough in what you're doing. If you don't, then you just got to find it's not a big deal. You just find a new thing. There's a difference between giving up and being tired. There's a difference between giving up and just making a more sensible decision.
100%.
But at the same time, if you feel good about it, then you just can't give up. I just feel like you always, I'm not something like 90-year-old in my deathbed, but I feel like there are people who have been in that situation very publicly have said, that's my one regret. You've got to go for it. Like, what are you going to lose at the end of the day? And it's back to that point I said at the beginning about grads asking for advice. Like, don't look for shortcuts though. Like, if you actually want this, you shouldn't be asking to me about shortcuts. You should be so passionate about being part of this journey that you actually love the mundane shit things. Like I said at Mandara at the beginning, it was like, all I had to give was my time. So when I had to do real bitch tasks, there's an element of relishing them, because I'm like,
people were jumping out their seat to them, weren't they? From that was a hard working group of people, wasn't it? Like in the conditions there.
But it's just perspective, and I wish there was more of that, because it's like, no, I just want to be rich now, and ironically, by being
so is that what do I get for this if I do that, rather than just do it, and then
ironically, by being so good at even something like admin or whatever, ironically, you get your opportunity from. And that's when you start to get shortcuts, ironically.
Yeah. I think that's so valuable, Greg. It's that whole people looking at things through this like lens of what is this getting me versus what am I becoming here?
Yes.
And just trying to transfer that to like, what are you learning in this job that you may temporarily hate? Or because if you can extract that learning and develop that mindset, even if it is just learning that this isn't for me, why not? Well, what is? There's always a lesson in there.
Always a learning. So maybe it's embrace. Sounds bad, but embracing pain, right? If you're not really embracing it and working through it, then you're just sitting at home playing PlayStation or Netflix, aren't you?
And comfort's the enemy of progress in anything, right?
Yeah. Greg,
thank you so much. Absolutely love that conversation. And we'll have to get you on again to chat more on the leadership and team aspects. But mate, that was amazing.
It's great that you're doing these podcasts. I think you've had some great guests, and I hope it keeps growing and growing. It's so applicable to everything. But again, almost like the way you're doing it, right? You're not giving people easy shortcut answers like other people you see out there who are giving you quotes and saying this is how you do this. There's no easy way. Learn to love the grit, and here's how these people who are all saying the same thing did it. And I think it's a very new, novel approach to, I don't even know what you want to call it, performance. And I urge people to read the book and to get stuck in. And I think you've got a big future ahead of this. So,
no, thank you, mate. That means a shit ton coming from you. Right, I'll see you for a beer soon.
Yeah,
catch you soon, mate. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us today. I love this topic of human performance and excellence, and I've been engaged in it neurotically for the last 20 years. It's a sincere privilege to have the opportunity to share my knowledge, network, and learnings with you. Now, go and put the principles to work. Make sure you let us know what resonates. Reach out with questions, blind spots. We've got you covered. Remember, excellence is just a series of days repeated over and over again. Now go and win your day. In 2021, I published my first book, Accelerating Excellence. If you're finding the conversations and information on this podcast useful, you might want a physical reference point and to gain even deeper awareness of the concepts discussed. The book's actually more of an operation manual containing more detail with a step-by-step guide on how to implement all this stuff so you can get maximum benefit, which was one of my main motivations in writing it. Yes, I want the podcast and the book to be inspiring and entertaining, but it was non-negotiable for me to make sure that the listener or reader is provided with a structure and direction in terms of actually putting this stuff to work. The book's called Accelerating Excellence. It's a #1 international bestseller. And if you're moving from more than just interest towards implementation, I think you'll really enjoy it. Like everything I do, the book is evidence-based, but practice-led, drawing on my experience working with some of the world's most elite, exclusive, high-performing teams and individuals. It's filled with highly actionable strategies you can apply today to become better tomorrow. If this sounds like something from you, see the link in description where you can download 6 chapters of the book for free in either audio or digital format. It's also available to purchase on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at your local bookstore. I hope you enjoy. By now, we all know the importance of a winning mindset. We're bombarded with elite performers telling us that mindset's what separates the best from the rest. That if we want to be successful, we need to be more confident, resilient, and motivated. And of course, when panic strikes, we need to calm down, relax, or chill out. Great, we get it. But the question is how? We're given this guidance with almost zero practical advice in terms of how to achieve it. Where can we actually go to develop that world-class mindset? What's the back squat for resilience, the bench press for confidence, and the bicep curl for positive thinking? Well, that's why I created the Mindset app. Through the app, you'll gain access to the psychological skills training used by world champion athletes, special forces operators, and some of the world's most successful traders and investors. The reality is these guys pay me a fortune to help them get this right. But the thing is, these skills are equally, if not more important for the aspiring athlete, executive, or operator. And that's exactly why I created this app. I want these tools and training available to anyone, anywhere, anytime. Mindset is a skill, and like any skill, it can be developed with the right strategy and effort. The tools and techniques are designed in a way that will literally rewire your brain, like learning to ride a bike or drive a car. All the techniques are designed with creating a high-performing, self-regulating you 2.0. Every strategy in the Mindset app is backed by empirical research. There's 10-minute emotional control training exercises that have been shown to increase your ability to overcome detrimental decision-making biases by up to 80%. In another study, just 3 weeks of executing visualization training led to 34% improvements in performance. Another research group found 50% greater improvements in the rate of learning. And just a few weeks of performing visualization led to 22% reductions in anxiety and 21% increases in confidence. These numbers are phenomenal, and I've never met an elite performer in any domain that can afford to be missing out on this type of edge. What I love most is that we've structured everything so that you don't need to carve out an extra hour in your day to get this done. Small bite-sized chunks of 5 to 10 minutes are all it takes. In fact, I'd only encourage you to use the tool on your commute, in the sauna, at the end of your working day, or bolt it onto the end of your gym session. Any dead time you have can now immediately be transformed to deliver you extreme performance gains. My goal is to remove every possible obstacle to your development. And with that in mind, the basic package is completely free. Visit the link in description and sign up for our pre-launch free emotional control, visualization, and performance routine programs.